Welcome, everyone. This is the FSPA's Encuentro at the Border Committee's forum this evening. My name is Sister Teresa Keller. I'll be just kind of moving things along a little bit. So grateful to have our speaker tonight. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Please make sure you stay on mute. If you do have questions or comments or can't hear or something like that, please put it in the chat and we will be monitoring that. Just for those that are high J's, we'll go ahead and do a little bit of an outline of the evening, a little welcome, a little prayer, a little introduction, and then we'll have our speaker talk. And at the end, we'll do some questions. And again, if you have questions along the line, please feel free to put them in the chat room. And then we'll do a brief evaluation if at all possible. So for those out on the West Coast, good afternoon. For those on the East Coast, good evening. For those here in the Midwest, welcome. We're going to start a little bit with prayer this morning, and then I'll do an introduction. Prayer this evening is just focused on two speakers. Mary Sullivan, who's a professor of ethics at the University of Notre Dame, and she had an article in Commonweal magazine in August, as well as the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther Jr. about the Good Samaritan. Meg Sullivan writes, I ask my students if they understand Samaritanism in the same way Christians do. The concept comes from us from the famous parable in the Gospels of St. Luke. A man is robbed and beaten while traveling down the road to Jericho. Two passerbys, both religious elite, see the man in need but ignore him. Then a Samaritan comes along and sees the man and is moved with compassion. His response is intimate and intense. He bundles the man up, takes him to an inn, cares for him throughout the night, and promises the innkeeper to pay for any expense over and above what is needed to help him fully recuperate. Jesus offers a parable as an answer to the question of how to understand the greatest commandment, the foundation of Jewish and Christian moral life. We are meant to be moved to love others, including strangers, in a way that expresses radical generosity. In Martin Luther King's speech, I've been to the mountaintop, he preached about the Good Samaritan as the action of the moral life. He asked us to develop a moral life that is dangerously unselfish and political. This evening, as we learn and reflect and discuss immigration, we imagine ourselves through the Jesuit tradition of traveling the Jericho Road. We are reminded the immigration road, like the Jericho Road, is dangerous, filled with strangers, hostile to those not prepared, but it also holds a promise of a better life and a better world. Again, Dr. Luther King in his speech, the Jericho Road, that's a dangerous road. In the days of Jesus, it came to be known as the bloody road. And you know, it's possible that that priest and that Levi looked over that man on the ground and wondered if the robbers were still around. Or it's possible that they felt the man on the ground was merely faking, and he was acting like he had been robbed and hurt in order to seize them over, lure them with a quick and easy seizure. So the first question that the priest asked, the first question that the Levi asked was, if I stop to help this man, what will happen to me? But the Good Samaritan came by and he reversed the question. He said, if I do not stop to help this man, what will happen to him? Question is, if we do not stop to help the immigrant, what will happen to them? That's the question. And this evening, we pray, Lord, direct our energies this evening to follow the Jericho road, to be that good Samaritan. Remember in our thoughts and prayers all those who are suffering, especially in Florida along the coast, that you continue to give your love and grace upon them in this very much time of need. Amen. So be it. I get your name wrong again. I just know it. Ronnate, I want to say Renee, is the head lobbyist on immigration for Network, where she develops and executes strategies to advance our agenda on Capitol Hill and with the administration. She came to Network with a long life of experience in federal legislation and administrative lobbying in DC. And she has worked on many aspects of immigration policy and practice, including asylum, refugees, unaccompanied children, and dreamers. She has a degree undergrad from the University of Houston and 2 graduate degrees, one from Fletcher School at Tufts, and a master's in law and international human rights law from Sussex in the United Kingdom. I hope you all find her as delightful as I have through her videos of Immigration 101, which I really found as a good baseline, and I hope you got a chance to do that. And so without further ado, our speaker this evening, thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Teresa. And it's Ronnate, so you were right the first time. Thank you all for spending your afternoon, evening here today with us, with me and all of us. As Sister Teresa was saying, I work in Washington, DC, and so my presentation today would be a little from the Washington, DC angle on what's going on. I know that there are a lot more practitioners in our group rather than people who look at things through the politics and the policy lens that I do. So I hope this would be interesting to you all. And again, as Sister Teresa was saying, if you can't hear because my internet has been weird all week, please put it in the chat. And also, and there'll be lots of time for questions at the end. Let me share my screen. So we'll get started. So I want to go a little back. I have more like a 5,000-foot view and talk a little bit more about the racism that we have seen in immigration, and then bring it down to what's happening from the policy and politics side, and then what we could be analyzing of what will happen at the elections for immigration policy. So as I said, talking more about the politics and the practices, that would be what I would be focusing on today. So I'm not sure if y'all could see this cartoon, but this was from the 1920s election in the US, and it is, again, how immigrants have been portrayed as the other, the stranger, and also, of taking American jobs, and that is why they needed to be pushed away. So you can see that the narratives that have that are coming up today in today's world has been there for quite a long time, and this is a part of the problem. But of course, while maybe they would be a part of elections in a small way before, now we are seeing obviously the issue of immigration, rich large, coming up much more I do believe in the recent years of elections. So immigration policy should be, it should be for sure that, how would you manage the migration of people? People have been migrating for different reasons. Some, some are fleeing persecution. Some want to find work. Some want to come temporarily. But what has happened to the US immigration policy, it is not about managing the migration of people. It has become, about who belongs to the US and therefore who has rights. So that is what the conversation, that is what the policies have turned into, but that is also what the narrative has turned into. And as I go along, I will be talking about the racism in many ways and forms that have infiltrated or that have been weaved into both immigration policies and practices that we're seeing today, and how it is affecting all of us. And I use this as the Harper's Weekly, the Journal of Civilization from the 1800s. I think it's a cartoon that says you can't see the bottom of the cartoon, but the cartoon is like, Black people coming from the South to Virginia was a bad thing, and that is why there's no balance. That's what the cartoon is, because what is happening, especially today, in terms of both the policies and practices, we see racism in many forms and ways, but there is always like a clear anti-Blackness. There's, we know that, and there's anti-Blackness in a ways to divide us, which is like very worrying and difficult. And it is being turned into something, again, as I said, something more than just, managing the migration of people. So the examples that I want to give, to show you how this works is, especially in policies. For example, there is TPS, and TPS is a temporary protection status. It is given for where the Secretary of Homeland Security will get together with the Secretary of State. They deign that a certain country is unsafe or unable to receive its people who are already here, and they think it's for temporary reasons. They will designate this country for a certain amount of time where people can stay and work if they're from that country. And there's been a long, whether it's war or whether it's climate related. So, for example, when there was earthquake in Nepal, we had TPS for Nepal. So, and the same way, when there was an earthquake in Haiti. So, so this is a very routine, in some ways, quite a routine thing that, all administrations would do. It is a part of the US law that, they have the power to do this. But you can see the difference and the way the practice of racism that has creeped in through this, simply because of the way these policies have been enacted. So for TPS for Haiti, there is TPS for Haiti, and it was going to end, because as I said, it's only for a certain period. And at that time, then there was the earthquake, and then there was also the president of Haiti had been killed. And so we knew it was going to end, and there was going to be these issues. So many advocacy organizations for almost a year to 6 months worked on asking for a redesignation, so to continue with this for another 18 months. We had to do all this work, and finally it was given, but it was not even put on the Federal Register for 6 months. Whereas if you think about that and the amount of work that had to go through this, as well as what happened in Ukraine, the Ukraine, the war was declared, and it was like the very next day we had TPS for Ukraine. And again, this is not to say that this is bad. What the people say, you see a problem. Can you hear me? Are we good? Okay. You see a problem, just like you would see in Ukraine, and very clear issues, and then it would be for the administration to issue these things. But it is interesting that it was only done so quickly for Ukraine, even when there was no precedent in that. Like Haiti, all they had to do is reissue. Ukraine was a new one. And versus, TPS for Mauritania. So Mauritania is the only country in the world that still has slavery on its books. People are held as slaves in Mauritania. The US says this. The US recognizes that there is slavery in Mauritania, but there is no temporary protection status for Mauritanians as yet. So this is the different ways people are treated is very, very concerning, and it allows for then this to be exploited during, I think now it's being exploited all the time to otherize, to make you understand that these people are not like you. These people are the stranger. These people are, they are not someone that you should stop and support, as Sister Teresa was saying about the Good Samaritan. And this is why this is like so concerning to us. The other policies that I've spoken about a lot, and I'll go into is the Remain in Mexico policy and the Title 42 expulsion policy. So the Remain in, one other thing about the TPS issues is as I said, the TPS is for a country already designated as unsafe. In the Ukrainian TPS, there was a sentence in there that says the country is designated unsafe, so nobody should be deported. This is, this makes sense. You've already decided this country is completely unsafe, so you can't deport people to it. In the Haitian TPS, there is no such sentence. We have been working to get that sentence in for the last year. However, so because there is no such sentence, deportations continue. As of today, deportations continue to Haiti. And it is completely mind-boggling that this is a country that the administration itself has said is unsafe. So why are we deporting people? But as from January of 2021 until now, more than 25,000 Haitians have been deported. 20% of them are children. This is to a country that we say is unsafe. So this, again, as I said, it allows for much more. It does not allow for people to be treated the same. It allows for people to be exploited in many ways. This type of different policies and different practices coming from the government in general at all levels. And as I mentioned, Title 42 and Remain in Mexico. So just an update on Remain in Mexico. So Remain in Mexico is a policy that was put in place in the Trump administration, and the Biden administration ended it, but then it went to court and it was stayed. And but in June, so this is a constant battle that's happening. And I'm sure people who work in reception and are there to receive immigrants, they find it, you all will find it, like sometimes you'll get there'll be a lot of immigrants or people fleeing danger coming to you, sometimes not so much. It's because of this back and forth of all these policies. So Remain in Mexico. Remain in Mexico, the Trump administration put it in. It is basically so that certain people I mean, there were certain designations, so, obviously people who are not Mexican, etc. They would stay in Mexico until their court cases were adjudicated and ended. This was a real problem because Mexico is not a safe place. And again, it's a place for people to be exploited. The Biden administration ended it. There was a court case. Then there was an injunction. So Remain in Mexico continued until 2 months ago. And then the Supreme Court said it's, it could be lifted. The Biden administration could lift Remain in Mexico. So as of now, there's no longer Remain in Mexico, and they are slowly trying to bring in people that were in Remain in Mexico. But again, there's lots of issues with this. Because of the Remain in Mexico policy, there was more than 10,000 reported rapes and attacks on people who stayed in the Remain in Mexico policy. Lots of people have been kidnapped, so it's difficult to and some people have left Mexico because it's too dangerous. Some people have been killed, and they have children who are also a part of this Remain in Mexico policy, so it's difficult to find them. So there are a lot of issues of this happening, but because the policy has now been lifted, both immigrant immigrant advocacy organizations and immigrant reception organizations, as well as the administration, is trying very hard to make sure people come through. And one of the organizations is Sister Norma's organization, Catholic Charities. All of them are working very hard to make sure that people are able to come through before there's another court case, and there is another court case. So this is the round robin of the policy world that we live in. And the other issue is Title 42. So again, just briefly, Title 42 is a policy that was put in place during the Trump administration. And it would expel anybody who came to the border anybody who came to the border and asked for asylum, didn't even ask you why you're there, and they would expel you back to Mexico. You could be a Mexican, you could be anything, but you also had no court case. The difference between Remain in Mexico and Title 42 is that for Remain in Mexico, you would get a court case. So there have been many, more than 70,000 people who have been expelled in this way, back to danger, back to Mexico. And there have been no safe routes to get to the US. This again was lifted by the president in May of this year. But again, there's a court case, and the lift has been stayed. So there's an injunction, and so it's not lifted right now, even though the administration did so. So because of this, it is continuing as it is continuing. And this, again, is creating lots and lots of problems at the border. It is creating ways to say, it's creating ways to inflate numbers. Let me say, you will see numbers in the news saying, there's 1 million people who have now crossed the border. They're not taking to account the 70,000 who they have pushed back. They are not, so so that is one thing. It is also creating a lot of pain, and because people are dying while crossing back and forth. There's no, and people cannot also cross at ports of entry, which is the safest to cross. So you will see people trying to come to the port of entry and say, I need asylum. The CBP officer will be like, no, because there's Title 42, we can't get you. And then when they go back, there will be a coyote or someone from the cartel who will be like, oh, I can take you through another route. So come with me. So it's foiling all of that kind of issues on both sides of the border. Despite the borders being, especially the southern border, being effectively closed, we're seeing a narrative of there is open borders. So let me tell you, there is absolutely no open borders. We are having real problems in trying to make sure that the right to seek asylum is still in place, that the US has the right, people coming to the US have the right to seek asylum. We're trying to safeguard that right, but it is really, really difficult at this point because of what I've been telling you about. One thing is racist policies and practices, and the fact that these policies are still very much in place. And the other thing is that some people, when they cross between points of entry, and again, let me tell you that it is legal to cross between points of entry and seek asylum. They cannot expel everybody because it's not practical. So they try not to. They have, when I say they, I mean the CBP and maybe the CBP actually. They obviously, it's not practical to fly people to Venezuela. It is not, although they are flying people to Haiti, so I don't know, but they do not fly people back to Venezuela, also because they don't. So there are certain, can you hear me? There are certain countries where they cannot at this time push people back. And so then they have to parole them in and keep them in. And mainly it's Venezuelans, some Guatemalans, and it also depends on, the CBP, who gets the people, where the people come from. So if they come to, certain points and they're overwhelmed, then sometimes the CBP is like, okay, we can't deport all these people, so then we'll try to process them in. So it's a bit ad hoc, but it's also on a logistical, where everybody is not expelled. So because of that, you will see certain people come through, and that is, mainly, as I said, Venezuelans, some Cubans, people from Brazil, and so there is people coming through. And now, because of the environment that we're seeing, we're also seeing the immigrants who are coming, who are able to get across the border and get paroled in. There's at least for DC and the general political environment, the issue of busing. So you all might have seen in the news that the governors of Texas and Arizona, they started busing immigrants to DC first. And so the DC buses started in April, mainly from Texas. Then I think in May, there was Arizona also started busing people, immigrants. And let me be very clear, all of the immigrants that were bused do have paperwork. They have been processed by CBP. So, people are saying these are undocumented immigrants. These are people who have nothing, and you don't know where they're going. This is not true. They do have paperwork. They have been processed, but they're being bused here to sometimes, they're being bused to an unknown environment, let's say. And then the last 2 weeks ago, you saw the flights from Florida to Martha's Vineyard. So the biggest issue with this busing stroke flights, basically the coerced movement, the coerced movement of people is the fact that, they're not given options. Immigrants are not treated with dignity. As you might have seen, the people who were, especially the people who were sent to Massachusetts, Martha's Vineyard, they were told, you're going to get jobs, you're going to get all these things, which was false. It was completely false, because asylum seekers are unable to even get that. And the money for that FEMA, etc., helps for reception, for people to receive communities or receive immigrants. That money is given to reception people at the border. So the whole issue with pushing people or sending people to different cities is not the fact that they're going to different cities. It's the fact that they don't get the choice. So that was especially bad with Massachusetts. With Texas and Arizona, it has got better to the extent that they asked, do you want to get on this bus? There's some NGO involvement. But again, it's like, how many choices do you have? And it's also, especially now, the buses to New York, and there's buses to Chicago as well. There's no coordination. It's the fact that, let's just send this bus and then somebody will pick them up on the other side. And especially in New York, a lot of the immigrants who are coming, they come with papers, as I said, but they have the wrong address on the papers. Most of them have the address of the Catholic Charities financial office, not a place where they can seek some rest and respite, be received, be given new clothes, and being asked, where do you want to stay? Do you have family, etc. So those are the issues with the busing. That it's not the movement of people. It's the fact that there's no coordination and there's no agency. There is little agency from the immigrants themselves. And on the issues of the addresses, that is very, very important. If you have to go to, all your information comes to the address that you put on this form. The immigrants are not putting an address on that form. It is the CBP that is putting this address. And clearly it is the wrong address. It is not your final destination. And then you don't know which court you're going to. You don't get any information on your case. And you could be deported simply because all of the details about your case is going to this address and you're not there. So it's very, very serious that you have the wrong address. It really will affect you. So this is sort of a game that has been playing. The DC buses, since April, there's been a lot more coordination with the city, etc. So there's been better, if people want to stay in DC, or if they want to move on to a different city. But again, because that was not as press-worthy now, since it's been happening since April, just suddenly, without coordination again, the buses were dropped in front of the vice president's office, again, for this show. To show, back to the story, what I started with, to show that these are people who are invading, those are the words that have been used, quote unquote invading, quote unquote taking our jobs. They don't belong. And again, it's about, what will it happen to you, as Sister Teresa was saying, what will happen to you, because these people will take from you. So because of that environment, again, these quote unquote stunts of, let's not send them to where we were usually sending them and have people to receive them. Let's send them to the vice president's house, the place in front of the vice president's house. And in DC, the place in front of the vice president's house is just a road. There's no place to even park properly to pick people up. So this is again to show the other. And because of this environment, it's clearly like very embedded in the election cycle. I'm sure, in different states, I know that in Georgia, I know that in Virginia, I'm not sure in others, there's so much of ads against immigrants. And this is really hugely concerning to especially us who are working to receive immigrants, to make sure that, we have better policies for immigrants. And it will affect the way we go forward. So one thing that, as something that we are looking at for the future is in the next appropriation cycle, which we hope will happen. So the next budget cycle, which we hope will be voted on in December, we are asking for more funding to give reception organizations. So to give Catholic charities or smaller organizations that would receive immigrants funding. However, you know, I cannot tell you how this is going to go, because everybody's watching and waiting to see if more anti-immigrant members of Congress will be elected, or more pro-immigrant members of Congress will be elected. So this is sort of the impact that this election will have on immigration, and also the impact that the immigration is having on the election. So that is what I want to talk to you about today, and I'm definitely, if you'll have questions, be happy to talk more. Thank you very much.
Bree has question.
I have a question. Thank you. Thank you for the background that you gave us. That is helpful. My question refers to when you talked about the sending people back at the border, that they have to stay in Mexico, even though they've requested asylum. I know the government, parts of the government are doing that, but clearly that's illegal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that is clearly illegal, especially now that the Supreme Court has also said it's illegal. So it was like, I mean, we believe that this was illegal. And now the Supreme Court has said so too. However, the problem is this is being relitigated. So what happened was, as I said, there was this policy. It went through the courts. Finally, the Supreme Court said it's illegal. And then, we were getting ready to, people were easily processed in January. It was a very good program, to end this illegal policy. Then there was the injunction. And then the Supreme Court said, okay, yes, you need to end it. But now Texas is again putting a new court case against the same thing. Of course, they're just saying, oh, Biden, the President Biden, issued a new order. He had to issue a new order, of course, because the old order was, not valid after the Supreme Court, because the timing had been. So it's just that they're relitigating the same thing. It takes time to go back to where I don't know if it's good. So that is.
You're on mute again. Ronnate?
Yes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
you're on mute. We didn't get the last part of your.
Oh, I said that. The main problem was the relitigation, but it is definitely illegal for them to be kept in Mexico. So, and just one other thing. So even expelling people obviously expelled to Mexico. And even that we think is illegal, because you have the right to seek asylum. You're not even getting a hearing now, but as the courts have stayed the order of lifting that. So again, people are in limbo, and people are not just in limbo, they are being hurt. People are dying, people are being tortured and raped because of this. That's on the one hand, while on the other hand, we clearly know that we can process people in. So 10,000 people. So in the month of February this year, 10,000 Ukrainians were processed in from the southern border, so from Mexico. So there's no reason why we can't do this for every other person. So this is the situation.
Thank you.
Other questions or? You know, it's such a complex way of doing anything to begin with. And, you know, then you talk about reforming the system, and then the recent reporting that they're going to go ahead and put 125,000 people in, you know, and you're kind of like, well, who are they? Where, you know, where did, I mean, is that like one of these countries with the TPS? Is it the people at the border? I'm like, is that just again the 2-year election cycle that we're gonna throw this out there again? Any comments?
So this is, I think, again, how I think because the narrative and the information out there is very confusing. And you get these snippets of, oh, all these people are coming in. So the 125,000 number that, you know, President Biden announced, that those are people who are designated as refugees. So the process for them to come in, for people who are designated as refugees to come in, basically mainly through the State Department. So if people are say in Turkey, you know, you have Iraqis who are fleeing Iraq and are living in Turkey, and that is sort of and they want to, you know, they can't say, oh, we want to come to the US. They're refugees, the people fleeing persecution, and they're living in Turkey. The United Nations then you know, goes to them, or they go to the United Nations and says, you know, we can't live in Turkey anymore because of, you know, we are being persecuted here as well. And then the United Nations will designate, you know, X amount of people as refugees. And then like all the countries in the world are supposed to take certain numbers of people. And for that, the US has taken 125,000. The US is not the ones who take the biggest number of refugees, but that is a different process from the people who are coming from the southern border. And it's not, I mean, I can tell you very clearly, it's not like, okay, there's too many people coming, because people come and go. This is clearly a way that this is a way that, you know, clearly, you know, the US has been supported with people who are from different countries, different places. You know, US is a country of immigrants, but it is not the country that takes the most amount of immigrants from refugees or otherwise. So that is a different process. The 125,000 announced is a different process. And that is, you know, that fits that number, certain categories, etc. And as I said, you know, those people are flown in with the help of the UNHCR. People who seek asylum, people can come in anyway. People can fly and ask asylum at the border. They can walk from either the southern border or the northern border. They can come by boat. So asylum is a different process, and you are most likely to be more in danger if you are being an asylum, you're asking for asylum. But the biggest thing is you have to be here. You have to be at a border and say, I am being persecuted, I need asylum. And that doesn't mean they give it to you. Right? They just say, well, the way the process is supposed to work is they say, okay, there's a process to decide whether you are actually someone who is fleeing persecution. And, you know, you can do these certain things. You can wait here while we are assessing your case. That's the way it's supposed to work. It doesn't work that way anymore. And also the system of receiving people. You don't want all of these, you don't want any one of these people, especially people who are fleeing persecution, to be put in detention. Prior to this, so prior to 2018, I would say, there was a much more robust ways of reception for people, whether they were refugees or whether they were asylum seekers. And that has been sort of gutted. Many organizations, especially like even Catholic Charities and other refugees international, other reception organizations, they had to close their offices, etc., because there was so much gap, so much pushback on refugees, and people didn't come. So that is sort of also the block. Well, now it is more difficult for people to come. The legal pathways for people to come is difficult, and yet we also don't have a lot of organizations to receive people.
Marie?
I have another question. It's just common knowledge that there are a lack of workers in the United States. It's a fact. I lived in Mexico City 22 years, and people would say, I really don't want to live in the US. I'd like to work there 6 or 9 months, come back and be with my family. What is it? What's that block in Congress that we can't do something about a plan to let people come in and go back home, cross that border safely, like a contract or whatever? Does Network have any lobbying on that?
Yes. So there are different
Thank
there are different types of visas for that. And again, it is very much blocked. And again, as I said, it's the environment, the policy environment that we work in right now is very difficult to get any sort of immigration through, the very idea that other people, people not deemed as Americans would come here, and somehow if they come here, you're considered that you might stay. They don't understand that people might not want to stay. They come here for work and they want to go back and stay with their families. So that concept in that environment it's very difficult to get it through to people that, if you actually had a system where you can have different, meet people's needs. So some people need to work and they need to go back. Some people need protection. Some people come here to study and actually do research, and then they would also go back, or maybe not. So it is a very, very difficult to break through in this environment and get it through that, you need to meet these people where they're at, and migration is not a bad thing. Migration is not something that's always negative. Right now, our policy environment is that migration is negative. But despite that, there are different visas. So there's like a farm worker visa program that would allow for this, hopefully, without exploitation. There is another type of visa called the F2A that, again, people are worried that there'll be exploitation if people are held in places they don't have ability to move employees, kind of thing. So there are different types of visas. The farm worker visa especially is, I think, the best. There's also, but the problem is that bill, but, we would definitely, did I block out again? Can you hear me, Teresa?
Yeah,
Okay,
you just kind of dropped there for a little bit.
So we are working on this bill that was passed in the House, but hasn't passed the Senate yet. And, we will have to wait till after the election to see whether it can go through again.
At this time, is there champions at all within Congress that Network is working with? Do we know who they are in
Yes.
regards to immigration? Yeah.
Yes, and I think it was so, you know, much as I painted this bleak environment, there is champions, and the champions have got louder, thankfully. So in the Senate, you would have Senator Menendez is a big champion. That's a senator from New Jersey. Senator Booker does support him as well. Senator Padilla from California is a very big champion. He's, you know, advanced so much, and he is Catholic. All of these senators are Catholic. Senator Durbin as well has been a long time supporter and champion. So in the Senate, they are the champions. In the House, Representative Castro, Representative Chuy Garcia from Illinois, they are the big champions as well.
Any up and coming champions at all in the midterms?
You know, people who are coming in for elections, people who are standing for the first time. Not that I know. I think in the elections, it's a bit hard to, nobody has been out there saying, oh, I'm going to be an immigration champion. Again, as I said, because of this environment that we're not seeing, I haven't seen that.
Fran? Fran, you need to unmute.
Sorry, I thought I did. I clicked it and it didn't work. Thank you very much for your comments. You said earlier when you first started that the process that is currently being employed by the United States when immigrants or migrants come to our border is illegal. And we know that, we've known that for some time. And my question has to do with the extent to which the illegality of that is being challenged or addressed in Congress. It occurs to me that even when with the Martha's Vineyard fiasco a couple weeks ago, I heard these folks that were bused referred to on the news by some people as the illegal aliens. So it occurs to me that we're doing the illegal thing by not allowing them to present themselves for asylum, and yet projecting that term illegal onto the people who really are not doing anything wrong. That angers me. And I'm wondering how that is being addressed by Network, or if it is in Congress, just the legality part of it.
So in Network, we are trying to push exactly what you're saying, that, you know, this, what people fleeing and coming to our borders, what they are doing is not illegal. What we are doing is illegal. We are,
Right.
we are breaking our own laws.
Yes.
Right? So we're definitely trying to push that through. You know, we are also, you know, linking it to the other organizations who are taking it to court. So the ACLU and others are taking the issue of especially the flying of the migrants to the flying of the asylum seekers to Martha's Vineyard, because that was a clear coercion, clear fraud, that they are taking that to court. So we are trying to link it with Congress to saying, hey, here, this is what's happening in court. This is illegal. You need to stop it. But again, it is both, again, because of the environment of like, what is happening, what will happen to us if we have all these people, people talk as if, there's going to be like so many people coming. And again, it's only if nobody talks about so many people coming when it's Ukrainian people. Nobody talks about, the pull factor, etc. for any of these policies that it's Ukrainians. It's never been mentioned. But if we try to do a policy for Haitians, there's always like, it will bring more people in. So the fear of people who might seem a little different is sort of the problem in Congress. And while some Congress people, really do get it and push it forward. So for example, with the whole Martha's Vineyard issue and the busing, immediately you had Senator Warren and others saying, there needs to be an investigation. This was wrong. And that there is some, we're getting through some, but we need a lot more because the narrative is against us. So regular people, regular Americans who are not in Congress, but who vote for Congress people, they are not getting this message. They are getting the message that illegals have come, and now illegals have been sent to Massachusetts or DC because DC and Massachusetts are the ones who are allowing these illegals to come, and so let them deal with it. So that is the reason, where you and everyone else would come into is to take the message and take the message to everyone else, and the narrative exactly how you said it. It is legal. It is legal for people to seek asylum. People, that one thing is it's legal. The other thing is it's also ethical, and it is also kind to give people a hearing. People are coming with their children. They would not, just be walking a million miles with a child just because, this looks like a place to get work. And then to greet them with guns and jeering, and then to push them back into a danger that was even worse from where they began is illegal, but it's also against, everything that we hold dear, I believe. So I think to push that forward is sort of the narrative that, and what I think regular, like to educate and to push that forward, that's saying, simply as you said it, they are not doing anything illegal. We are the ones who are doing it. And so we need to stop this. So to put that narrative forward, we need your support. We need you to give the message through, because clearly the media is not doing this. I mean, I also just heard on PBS, and sometimes I can't even watch the news because, so PBS is responsible, I feel it's responsible public television. But they would say the same thing. Oh, undocumented people are coming to DC. These people have documents, right? So that is the biggest problem. And irresponsible people in Congress then take that message and multiply it. And then you also have governors, etc. People who are elected to take care of people are then being very irresponsible. I mean, if you hear some of the speeches in Congress, you're like shocked that people would say this, but that's the way it is. But we are definitely pushing against this narrative and trying to alleviate this issue so that we could have a change of heart and actually have better policies.
Well, I see we're kind of at the end of our time here, and I have greatly appreciated this. Ronnate, this has just been awesome for me. Big round of applause to you. Thank you for joining us and providing some just really great information. I'm just going to jump and say, if you're not a member of Network, join. There's that little takeaway here, and get their newsletter. It's very, very informative. It keeps you up on just about everything in regards to their lobbying efforts. They do some great training also. We're going to go ahead and I put in the chat my email. address, tkeller@fspa.org. If you could send me an evaluation, if you feel inclined to do that, that would be very helpful. What was helpful about this session? What would you have liked differently? I know we had a little tech problem here, but we got through it without much of a problem. It's not like people yelling at me that they can't hear me. Okay, so in the end tonight, blessings on each one of you in your work and in your prayer life and in your life. And blessings upon you, Ronnate. And thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
Good night.